If you ask a coaster enthusiast what their favorite roller coaster manufacturer is, you will get an array of different responses. Maybe someone will say Premier Rides because of their old school intense LIM launches, or they're an ace boomer who will say PTC or Schwarzkopf. Maybe they love hypercoasters, so they say B&M, or they're a fan of beyond vertical drops, so they say Gerstlauer. Or maybe, just maybe, they're an idiot, so they say Mach Rides. Despite all this, the most common answer you will get is Intamin. Intamin Amusement Rides has been thrilling theme park guests since they built their first large coaster in 1981 at Marriott's Great America in Gurnee, Illinois. This coaster is called American Eagle, and it's a massive dueling wooden roller coaster. Combining the two separate sides of this coaster, the total track length comes to well over 9,000 feet long, which is more combined track than the longest roller coaster in the world, Steel Dragon 2000 at Nagashima Spaland. American Eagle seemingly opened a gate for Intamin to rise to the top as possibly the most loved roller coaster manufacturer. Their variety of coasters and willingness to take risks pulls in enthusiasts but draws away large companies like Six Flags and Cedar Fair. So let's get into why Intamin, despite constant problems, is considered by many to be the best roller coaster manufacturer. Before I get into the video, make sure to leave a like and maybe even subscribe to the channel. 77% of my viewers are not subscribed, and if you're watching this video, then you know who you are. You can also join the CT Coasters Discord server, which will be linked in the description below. If you want to follow me or my friend Adrenaline Central on Instagram or YouTube, those will also be linked in the description. Now that that's out of the way, let's get into the video. The 1980s was a huge time for Intamin. The company was expanding, and while they started off the decade with just a few coasters, they ended it with a pretty good lineup for a new company. This time period is when they introduced their Swiss Bob model. This coaster saw 7 installations all around North America and 1 in Europe. The lone European bobsled operated at Efteling until 2019 when it was removed. If you live in America though, you can still get a taste of the defunct Efteling coaster by going to Six Flags Over Texas to ride La Vibora. La Vibora uses old trains from Bob at Efteling. Intamin spent the 1980s selling kiddie coasters, Swiss Bobs, and the infamous Space Diver, which could have its own video about all of its issues. Intamin would start off the 1990s by introducing the multi-inversion coaster. There were a few different models of this coaster, and parks could do whatever they wanted with the layout. A park could go for a more themed approach, such as Disneyland Paris, who built Indiana Jones and the Temple of Peril, with only 1 inversion, or a park could go full inversions, like Thorpe Park did with Colossus, which features 10. This model would also help Intamin compete throughout the 1990s with B&M, who would also grow rapidly in that decade by selling stand-up, inverted, and sit-down looping coasters. Intamin would continue this while also selling other models like wooden coasters, which would only see 7 installations throughout the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. It wasn't until 1997, though, that Intamin did something big. At this time, the coaster war was nearing its peak. It was one park after another, building taller, faster, and crazier roller coasters, and Intamin wanted to dip their foot in the water. The company would build 2 massive roller coasters, one of them at Six Flags Magic Mountain in Valencia, California, and the other one at Dream World in Queensland, Australia. May you rest in peace. Superman Escape from Krypton at Six Flags Magic Mountain was a massive but short coaster. You launched forwards from 0 to 100 miles per hour in 7 seconds and went up a 415-foot spike. Following this, you would descend back down the spike, experiencing one of the best moments of weightlessness on any roller coaster. After this, you would hit the brake run. To say Intamin wanted to dip their foot in the water is truly an understatement. They had just built the tallest and fastest roller coaster in the world, and the first coaster to ever use linear synchronous motors for a launch. This, though, was just the beginning of Intamin's role in the coaster war. Intamin had experience with launch coasters. They had just built two of the fastest roller coasters in the world. Intamin would keep this information with them, but right now, they were working on something else. Intamin had come up with the Mega Coaster. The Mega Coaster was a coaster type that used Intamin's well-known triangular track from their multi-inversion coasters. The coaster would also use a new type of train, similar to the one on the multi-inversion coaster, but this time with a slick and very unrestricting T-shaped lap bar. In 1999, a prototype model was built at Six Flags Darien Lake in Darien, New York. The ride would stand 208 feet tall, travel 73 miles per hour, and boast almost 5,500 feet of track. Ride of Steel had a weird layout, with two massive helixes and an odd straight section in the middle of the ride. Nevertheless, people still enjoyed the coaster. It stood extremely tall, traveled at exhilarating speeds of over 70 miles per hour, and featured a number of airtime hills, all of which gave great floater airtime. The following year, Intamin would go even bigger. Intamin opened 3 coasters similar to Ride of Steel in the year 2000. The smallest of these would be a clone of the prototype. This coaster went to Six Flags America and would be called Superman Ride of Steel. The next largest of these coasters was also called Superman Ride of Steel, but this one had a drastically different layout to the prototype. The first half was full of airtime hills, while the second half was packed with bone-crushing helixes and 2 very small but powerful airtime hills. The third of these coasters was much larger than the others. This coaster opened up a whole new world for roller coasters. It created a type of coaster that only about 10 years prior seemed impossible.
At the turn of the millennium, there were signs. Was there something out there? A higher intelligence? A mysterious force at work?
On May 13th, 2000, Millennium Force at Cedar Point in Sandusky, Ohio, opened to the public. Millennium Force was the first ever Giga Coaster. A Giga Coaster is a full-circuit roller coaster standing between 300 and 399 feet tall. Millennium Force at 310 feet broke the height record by over 50 feet. Commonly, breaking roller coaster records is slow. Most of the time, parks will build maybe a couple miles per hour faster or go a couple feet taller. Beating the height record by over 50 feet was almost unheard of. But Cedar Point, they did it. Millennium Force was viewed by most people as the best roller coaster in the world for about 2 years. That's right, only 2 years. Sure, the coaster is still loved by many, including myself, and the coaster has gotten the Golden Ticket Award for Best Roller Coaster in the World over 15 times, but after 2 years, Millennium Force didn't quite still hold its magic. But why is this, you ask? The answer lies in the same park. In 2003, Cedar Point would shatter even more records. This time, it wasn't even close. Cedar Fair contacted Intamin to build their biggest coaster yet, and this time, Cedar Point would be going even bigger than they did only 2 years prior. The last launch coasters Intamin built were the reverse freefall coasters and Volcano the Blast coaster. These used linear synchronous motors, or LSMs, and linear induction motors, or LIMs, on each of their launches. LSMs are a great way of getting the train to its top speed, but the acceleration rate was very low. LSMs are magnetic, so there's no real mechanical element to the launch. This resulted in a fast launch, but not a very exhilarating one. What about the LIMs, though? These provided a very intense launch, but they were extremely unreliable. Not only this, but they require lots and lots of electricity to run, so costs can shoot up very quick if a park is not careful. A prime example of this would be Batman and Robin the Chiller at Six Flags Great Adventure. Since this was a dueling coaster, it featured 2 LIM launches, meaning double the electricity needed. The coaster took up so much money and electricity, it caused power outages in other places near the park. The ride was also problematic in other ways, and if you want to learn more about it, I recommend clicking the card in the top right to watch El Toro Ryan's video on it. Intamin had certainly tried with the LSMs, and the LIMs didn't really work that well. So what did they do? They would come up with a new type of launch, this time one that used a massive hydraulic motor, a windstrom, cable, and catch car. In 2002, Knott's Berry Farm opened a coaster called Accelerator. This would be the very first coaster to use an Intamin hydraulic launch. At the end of the launch was a very large hydraulic motor. This powered a massive windstrom that would spin, pulling the cable, catch car, and train along the launch track to its top speed. With this technology, Accelerator would launch from 0 to 82 miles per hour in only 2.2 seconds. Acceleration rate exceeded the LSMs by a lot, and it also exceeded the LIMs. Though it wasn't the most powerful launch at the time, that would go to the SNS pneumatic launch. It was still something revolutionary, and Cedar Fair, who purchased Accelerator, was all over the idea of an insanely fast and quick launch. Accelerator was insanely fast. Though it wasn't the fastest in the world, or even the fastest in California, it still gave one of the most thrilling launches on any roller coaster. The next year, Cedar Fair would bring this model to their flagship park, Cedar Point. They would build a giant hydraulic launch coaster right in the center of the park. The coaster would accelerate from 0 to 120 miles per hour in only 4 seconds. After this, you'd shoot up a 420-foot top hat, the tallest in the world. You would then spiral to the ground in a 270-degree twist. After leveling out, you'd hit the brake run. The ride was over in under 20 seconds, but riders got more of a thrill than they did on any other roller coaster. Top Thrill Dragster was wildly successful among all Cedar Point guests. Lines would pile up hours long, and it was Cedar Point's most popular coaster to date. Despite its popularity, the coaster was plagued with issues. Hydraulic launches feature hundreds of moving parts, and all it takes is one of these parts to malfunction, and the whole ride is down. This led to Top Thrill Dragster's operations and reliability being extremely bad, and most people who went to Cedar Point just to ride the coaster did not get the chance because it experienced constant downtime, and it still does to this day. Top Thrill Dragster has costed Cedar Point lots of money to maintain since it opened in 2003, but they continue to pour money into it because it is one of their most popular roller coasters. Top Thrill Dragster would only remain the tallest and fastest coaster on the planet for 2 years. In 2005, Six Flags bought a similar coaster. King Ka, Six Flags Great Adventure's new strata coaster, would have the same layout as Top Thrill Dragster, except it was 36 feet taller, 8 miles per hour faster, featured a dual loading station, over-the-shoulder restraints, and a 129-foot tall airtime hill after you exit the top hat. Being the tallest and fastest coaster in the world, King Ka took the records from Dragster. Despite this, the ride is constantly claimed to be worse than Top Thrill Dragster for its weak airtime hill, uncomfortable restraints, and rough experience. 15 years later though, and King Ka is still the tallest coaster on the planet and the second fastest. The speed record was taken from King Ka in 2010 by Formula Rossa at Ferrari World in Abu Dhabi, another hydraulic launch coaster with a top speed of 149 miles per hour. You may be wondering, did King Ka end the coaster war? I believe that the answer to that question is yes. From the year 2000 to 2005, we saw the height record go up by over 100 feet, but since 2005, the record has still yet to go up. Parks don't want to build bigger, they want to build better. And this isn't what the coaster war was, which is why it's over. As a company, Intamin is known for innovation. If a park wanted to build the tallest or fastest coaster in the world, they would most likely go to Intamin. If a park wanted a launch that would knock your socks off, they would probably go to Intamin. Intamin was ambitious, and they still are to this day, but 20 years ago, things were a bit different. Intamin wasn't just ambitious, they were too ambitious. This innovation and ambition came with a cost, and that cost was unreliability. It started with the Mega Coaster and the Giga Coaster, which were two very similar models. The Mega Coaster, mainly using a chain lift, would tend to have issues with its lift hill, since most of them were so large. The Giga Coaster, which used a cable lift, saw unreliability with that aspect of the ride. These two coaster models would also commonly have issues with other aspects, such as the trains, magnetic brakes, and block zones. Moving on from that is the Accelerator Coaster. This model is commonly seen as the most unreliable roller coaster model. The worst case of this is Top Thrill Dragster. As I mentioned before, Top Thrill Dragster has had issues since it opened with its launch. Intamin's hydraulic launch uses so many moving pieces at one time, you'd be surprised it doesn't break down more often than it does. The launch track is just over 550 feet long, and in just that one part of the ride, it's packed with hundreds of moving pieces, each needed for the coaster to correctly operate. The first are magnetic brake fins that lower and raise before and after the coaster launches, and all of the mechanisms that allow them to raise and lower, all of which are needed for operation. You also have the hundreds of sensors along the launch track that can tell if something is wrong. If one of those is broken, the coaster may not operate. All of these factors add up to both a maintenance and a reliability nightmare. Top Thrill Dragster experiences downtime nearly every day of operation, and this is not good for Cedar Point guests and even Cedar Point as a whole. Luckily, Top Thrill Dragster is among Cedar Point's most popular roller coasters, so they continue to maintain it and put money into it, but really the coaster is awful at being reliable. Intamin is also ambitious. The 2010s saw two of Intamin's most ambitious projects yet, Intimidator 305 and Sky Rush. In 2010, Cedar Fair opened two roller coasters by the name of Intimidator. One of these roller coasters was a forceless, no airtime hyper by Bolliger and Mabillard. This red and white giant would line Carowinds' parking lot and give guests something to look at while parking their car. The other Intimidator opened at King's Dominion as the complete opposite. To start, Intimidator 305 was built by Intamin. It was also a giga coaster, standing 305 feet tall. In addition, the coaster would be located in the very back of the park. But most of all, this Intimidator would be one of the most intense roller coasters ever built. On April 2nd, 2010, Intimidator 305 at King's Dominion opened to the public. The ride had issues from day one. The first issue came with the first turn of the ride. This element was extremely intense, pulling 4.5 Gs. This was the very first element on the ride, so it was the first thing that guests got when riding, a high-speed, near-blackout turn. As you may imagine, this was not a good impression on the general public. King's Dominion did several things to fix this, such as moving the trim on the airtime hill to the drop, but eventually settled on spending even more money to reprofile the first turn to make it wider for the 2011 season. Other issues came with the train's wheels. Due to the high speeds and forces of the ride, during its opening year, Intimidator 305 would need some of its wheels replaced every single day, and replacing wheels like that is expensive. Luckily, Intimidator 305 now has better wheels that don't wear out as quickly. While all of this money got spent on Intimidator 305, the general public lost interest in the coaster. Most of them were scared away from the high positive Gs, big steep lift hill, and minimalistic support structure. Fast forward to today, where even on King's Dominion's most busy days, Intimidator 305 doesn't typically get a line over half an hour long. It's clear to say that Cedar Fair lost lots of money on this coaster. They spent nearly $30 million on it, and that money didn't return how they expected. Though it may be one of the best roller coasters in the world, Intimidator 305 was a total flop, and in the end, it was a result of Intamin's wild ambition to build the best roller coaster in the world. Similar problems came with Sky Rush at Hershey Park. The park needed a hypercoaster, so they contacted Intamin. Instead of building a traditional hypercoaster, Hershey Park needed something compact. They had a pretty small space to put the coaster in, right next to Comet. Due to the restrictions of the plot of land, Intamin would have to build a hypercoaster with a twister layout. This wouldn't be another Raging Bull though. Sky Rush would be packed with some of the most intense turns and most powerful airtime hills ever. In addition to this, Sky Rush would be the first of two Intamin wing coasters ever built. This meant that the restraints would be an absolute nightmare, coming down on your thighs as the ride went through its intense turns. These super high positive Gs and very uncomfortable restraints would draw people away from Sky Rush, similar to Intimidator 305. Hershey Park would even go as far as to open Candymonium in 2020, another hypercoaster, but this one far less intense. I've been talking about Intamin for about 20 minutes now. Now that we've learned the history of the company and about their issues, let's go back to the beginning. Why is Intamin considered by many to be the best roller coaster manufacturer? If you want to find out, you have to take a few things into consideration. First of all, look at how Intamin has grown. Intamin started off with a kiddie coaster at Cedar Point. Just a kiddie coaster. Just a coaster which most Cedar Point visitors are too tall to ride by themselves. Just a little kiddie coaster that is overlooked by Top Thrill Dragster, the tallest and fastest roller coaster on the planet when it opened. A similar case goes for Six Flags Great Adventure. In 1996, they opened a small indoor family coaster built by Intamin. 9 years later, and look what they add. A Stratocoaster with a 128-mile-per-hour hydraulic launch. A roller coaster taller than any other on the planet. This is why Intamin is so special. You can also look at the company's variety of roller coasters. They started their game with wooden coasters and bobsleds, and now they have beautiful steel coasters with big, graceful launches. They took their wooden coaster and made it extreme with the prefabricated track. They have grown almost more than any other roller coaster manufacturer ever, and this is why people love them so much. It seems like every year they're coming out with something new and amazing. Remember in 2018 when Intamin announced 2 new coasters, each looking like some of the best in the world? Then they announced Pantheon in 2019, an amazing launch coaster at Busch Gardens Williamsburg. In 2021, they're going to open Velocicoaster, Conda, and Pantheon. Conda possibly being the best roller coaster on the planet, and Velocicoaster probably being the best roller coaster in Florida. With Intamin, it's always something new, amazing, innovative, and one of a kind. Tell me in the comments below what you think of the Swiss company Intamin Amusement Rides. Which of their coasters have you ridden? Which one is your favorite? If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. I love your support on the channel and thank you for watching. Anyways, this is CT Coasters, signing off.